All right, good to see everybody. I'll get started. I think you know a little bit by now, I like boxing, and I showed another analogy to the defense today. This one was from 1979 of Leonard Benitez. And after the fight, he goes, I never, swung and missed so many times, but I knew I was going to keep fighting all the way through to the end. And he goes, it hurts, but that's what it takes to go win. And I thought I wanted the players to see that, to know early on there were some swings and some misses of some things. And so we changed midstream on some calls and some things. That's what, our league's about, and making changes and adjustments. I was super pumped for the guys on their finish and their attitude of what that stood for. But more than anything, man, I was proud of the guys, a couple guys in some new spots as we're going through defensive end, at safety, and at other spaces. So I thought that showed a lot about who we are, how tight and connected they are. And so it's not the easiest thing to do, so that's why I wanted to make sure give the players the recognition, the credit of moving around and even making some changes during the game. And they did that, and I was super pumped to see those guys battle and the way they did. If it was ready to go past 4 quarters, we were ready to do that too. So it was one of those kind of days where you just had a sense it was going to be tough and battle, and it certainly was. So
will you walk us through where this happens because you lose Lawrence? Obviously, you'd put together your plan as a staff, presented it, had a practice, and then you're going from that point on.
Sure.
How much you tear up, how much time you spend redoing it, what your approach is.
Yeah, I would say definitely not tearing it up, but what I did think is I went right, directly to Mike post practice. Here's my thoughts. I'd heard, with Randy's injury that he'd be out. With DeMarcus's injury that he'd be out. And I said, here's what I'm thinking in order to do that, because we already had, Randy out. And so he said, yeah, I think that's a good call. And so that's kind of when I put the plan into motion to change positions with Micah for the week. And he did that on Thursday and Friday and Saturday as a defensive lineman. And Donovan, we didn't know, what his status was. And so then, him going out, there's a lot of moving parts as the game plan went along. I thought the players really did a good job of maneuvering through that and making sure, whatever way it was going to go, Ukuamu was ready for reps. Hooker certainly took some. Kurse took some. KZ was limited for a day. And we just wanted to make sure we had enough coverage that we could go around, and certainly the matchups were difficult against their offense.
What does that say about Mike? Certainly he could rush. He knew he had the rush ability, but play full-time defense end first time in high school,
right?
And to do it midweek.
Yeah, I'd say I'm hard on him, and because I have a lot of belief and trust in him. I would not have asked him to do that if I didn't think he was ready to do it. And this is the best thing for us to go win this game. And so he said, okay, I'm down, I'm into it. And so that's, to me, I wouldn't have even considered it had I not thought he could handle it. I've seen him what he done on the edge, and so doing it all the time is different than just doing it on third downs or in some 2 minutes. So there's a lot of other factors that go into it, because quite honestly, he's never done some of the pressures and anything as a defensive end. That he knows him at linebacker, but he didn't know him in that space. But he's a quick study, and like I said, I got high standards for him to make sure he hits the mark, and he certainly did. I anticipated some errors, and there's actually less than what I thought heading in.
How much is he's rushing using his hands? How much is that he's learning from Let and Lawrence, maybe even yourself, and AD about just using your hands to get to the quarterback?
Yeah, I think that's already been part of his process. So it wasn't like he hasn't been working on the end of the line. You guys saw during training camp where we were working together and into the season. So he comes down to get pass rush work on a regular basis. But Tank has definitely been somebody that's had a good effect on him. I know he spent time with DeMarcus. That certainly helped, and we're with him on a regular basis. But like I said, I was proud of him. I'm tough on him. I got high standards for him because of where I think he can get to, and so we'll continue to push him. And he's still developing as a linebacker too. So you don't want to give him so many things that let's settle down and focus on things that he does really well.
Man, so well, 3 days work at the end and having such an impact. You find yourself, maybe we should keep him there. I mean, I don't know which position has the most impact for your team, but as a rusher, he was special, as you saw.
Yeah, I thought he did a good job, and that'll continue to be part of what he does. But there's also some really good linebacker things that he does, and so we're going to make sure we don't overload him, but get him the right amount that he needs. And I think that's an important piece to that. If I ever feel like I'm pushing him over the edge of volume or anything, that we back off. But he was definitely chomping at the bit for more in the game, which is a good thing. That's what you want from guys.
Was it something that you learned about him in the pre-draft process, that he could handle a whole bunch of things? When did you kind of
Not yet to go through it, I think, here. And so, okay, I tried them when we got here together in OTAs and did some things. Let's see what this looks like. Let's see what that looks like. So I would say it was more of a byproduct of all the time that we had spent together. So that's why I really had very little hesitation to say, hey, this is, I know, a job that you can get done this week, and this is the best way for us to go win. And he was down for it.
Mike, the advantage is that if he's the type of player that the quarterback has to wonder, is he lining up here? Is he lining up here? I mean, will that give your team an advantage if he's all over the place?
Yeah, it definitely is. Especially if you're standing up too. If you're over on this side, on the end of the line, or over on this side on the end of the line, that's one thing. But if you add other elements to that, I think that only adds to it.
Michael wants to play more. He's wanted to play more since he got here. Should he play more? Is he ready to play more? His snap count. Do you think he's ready to see that increase?
Yeah, I like where he's at, and I think we kind of hit the mark of where I hoped he would go, as a defensive lineman in the game. I think he was in the low 40s, but yeah, definitely a lot different when you're battling, 320-pounders as opposed to out, guarding running backs and tight ends. So that factors in as well.
What did you think of DeMonte Casey? Just mainly the interception. I would say the forced fumble a week ago, but then that key interception. You've been around him a lot. Certain players like him just have kind of a knack for those type of plays.
I would say that's true, and I think that goes in the evaluation process on somebody. Whether they're coming up in college or they're in the NFL, and you're looking at them as a free agent. And I think that's one of the things with the secondary. There's really some guys with very good ball skills, and Trey is certainly that way. So when the team scouted him, look no further than his receiver background, but he's got fantastic hands. And Case has always been somebody that's had a real ball hawking mindset and a fearlessness and a boldness about him. So I love that about his style of play.
There are different ways you could prioritize and rank skills. You talked about how ball skills was a premium. When you come to a new team like Dallas, is that something you're like, okay, well, Trey has that, so let's get someone to pair with him, because then that can be all in on our strength? Or how do you go about working through that?
I think it's just you want it from this point forward as often as you can. And there's certainly a lot of guys here who already had, good ball skills. I think Donovan does, so as you're going, Anthony does. And so as you're going through that, you want to make sure that you're continuing onto that. And so that was what was nice. We added some guys in free agency and in the draft. And of the people that we did add onto that, I would say their ball skills were good or better, in the evaluation.
Is you need somebody, is he almost at that point where you say...
Can you hear the first? Okay, yep, gotcha.
Is that point where you say, this is the opponent's number one receiver, he's on him, or he's not there yet?
He certainly is ready for that challenge, and we have done that some already this season, to put him into that spot, and he really has responded. So it won't be every game that we'll do that, but there'll certainly be ones that we will. And he's definitely, you feel his intent, you feel his length and strength at the line of scrimmage, and then I hit on the ball skills earlier, but I've been impressed by him by the first 2 weeks for sure.
The interception he has, that just him, the film study, finding that route and just picking that off.
Yep. And so onto those ones, you got to have good recall to know, hey, this is a route that could come up. This is when I can take a chance. This is when I can't. And you really have to do that out at the practice field to make sure that's a spot I can go to, that's not. And so there's been times where he's undercut too much and the ball got thrown. Okay, what'd you learn? How do we play from that? And he plays against some pretty good guys on a regular, so he's got plenty of good training. But I'm very encouraged about his progress. I really am.
Jalen and Leighton, what did you see from them on film? Obviously, they both led the team tackles, taking a larger role with Micah at end.
Well, I think number one, we knew that this back, could really break tackles. And that's, something that we've seen, from his past. He had, I think it was 2019, he might have had 90 catches, where he was a factor. I knew he was going to be a factor in the passing game, and he was in ours. Where he took some shots down the field. I think there was one on Leighton, and we got a foul on it. Another one down to Kiki, where he defended him, but there was a foul on the other side. And then after that, they were mostly underneath throws. But that said, we knew that was going to be something to match. But we knew we had to play strong in the run game, and those two guys certainly have the size and strength to do that. And I was pleased with both Leighton and Jalen in there.
That's where Anthony Brown is right now.
I really thought he tackled. There's one that he didn't, on the touchdown that they scored, but I thought he was really secure in his tackling. And I thought it's been a strength that he's a really competitive guy. And so down the red zone, he really stood up. And that's what I thought. Here's a matchup on a taller receiver to go against Williams. And they took their shots at him. And I thought, man, I was really impressed by him, standing up. And I thought for him, that was a good game, that he really had to fight and battle and scrap all the way through. And that was one of the things, because of the size of these receivers, that you're going to have to go all the way to the ground through the catch. That's the kind of competition we're going to have. So a couple things. We knew the quarterback would rip it. We turned up the speed on the jugs machine to say this guy can really rip, and then competing all the way through to the ground. And Brandon Smith was one in practice I thought we really challenged, and he did a good job of working through the receivers, and the guys were battling for him because we knew they were going to make some contested throws into tight windows, and those were the ones we'd have to fight and battle and defend for.
Leighton drew 3 holding calls in the game. Does that get marked in the grade reports?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, certainly on the one I can remember vividly on the blitz where the center kind of came back and grabbed just because there was 2 guys into that spot. But he absolutely, we call that a forced penalty. And it's a big green plus.
Mike said Kurse got a game ball after the game. What's his impact been for you guys so far?
Well, I think number one, he's a really authentic leader. And for those of you who've been around JK so far, there's an honesty about him, from teammate to teammate. And so that's always stood out from the spring to where, he is today. But then him stepping in and, playing really the entire game, at both safety spots. We call it a big nickel, where sometimes he's down. You see him by the end of the line of scrimmage. You see him sometimes in a 3-safety defense. One of those players is generally the nickel. They just take on that responsibility of that position. And JK and Hook have been 2 guys that we've done that with. And so it's a little bit of dual learning for them, but from some of the matchups, it's a good one for us. And so he's really responded to that. He's always had the history of, being able to guard tight ends, but I think you saw the physicality and the blitzing and the tackling, and I thought, man, that was a really impactful part of our game, and I thought he was that way.
Did y'all know he was that good? I mean, obviously in Minnesota and Detroit, I think I don't know if he played as much as he's playing now. More of a special teams guy.
Yeah, he had played some, and in Minnesota, like I was referring to earlier, they had some packages where he would, guard a big receiver and a tight end, and he's always kind of had that reputation and been known to do that. And so to see that role expand, and we've got great trust and belief in him.
Big nickels, you use a lot in Atlanta or Seattle, a little bit of both?
More so in Atlanta, where we would match up onto some teams that were, using someone as a featured tight end that could split out. Like so often there's on most teams there's a tight end. It's like this guy he's a receiver and he's excellent at it. And so sometimes you want to match up somebody who's got a different skill set on the tight end. So that's why I think when you talk to Mike and to Steven and Jerry, and that's why the versatility on the whole roster is a big deal. Why do we like safeties who've got length and speed? Sometimes it's just to do that role really good. And if we can get guys, this guy's really good for short yardage. This guy can guard big, long tight ends. This guy is fast enough to play out on the edge. This guy's a square nose tackle. And finding roles for about 18 or 19 or 20 guys, that's, to me, when you're going to be at your best, because not every offense is built in exactly the same way. And so some guys want to feature different packages, and so you have to have enough depth and versatility to do that. And fortunately for us, we do have that kind of versatility, especially on the back end. We got some tall, long safeties. We got some guys that like to play in the middle of the field, like Kays, and so having the ability to move guys around into different spaces, that helps.
You go from Brady to Herbert to now Hurts. What's the different challenge that this guy has than what you had the first 2 weeks?
Can you hit the first 2, please?
Brady to Herbert to now Jalen Hurts.
Oh, gotcha. Thank you.
What's the different challenge with him than the first couple of games?
Well, I would say, we saw a little bit of the, mobility, in some of the, design quarterback runs this past week, with Herbert. You saw that down the red zone, and he got outside the pocket to scramble for some. So I'd say those come alive, but this comes, even to a larger sense in terms of how they'll feature him in the run game. So I'd say a lot different, between the 3 players, but as we're going through the week, that's one of the things that we'll certainly have to prepare for, the legs of Jalen and the design quarterback runs. And Herbert had some of them, but not to the extent that Philly does, and certainly nowhere near the extent that Tampa had.
With the emphasis on rushing lanes that goes into Hurts, does Micah, if he's to stay at end, does his meeting schedule change? Is he spending more time in the D-line room than he would be linebacker room? Like, how do you?
Yeah, we haven't gotten down the road far enough yet to figure out where and what, but that would be the case if he was, just like we did this week, if he was more at one spot than another. Sometimes we even do it by day. If we're working more of a third down part of things, he'd be more with them. But we haven't discussed what parameters we're going to put on that this week just yet.
How was he with his rush lane? How was he with his rush lane stuff in the game yesterday? Was there one where he dipped inside and Herbert was able to get outside? Does he need to be more concerned with contain in that situation, or is that okay?
Sometimes that's the case. Other times we're trying to draw someone inside, so the other side would go high. So we call that like a high-low. So if I was the left end, I might come up and under for the right end to go and see if he can create the chase. So other times you just got to take your shot when somebody oversets you to go inside. So no, there was no issues from a contained standpoint on his responsibility. If there was one that he came under, there's usually someone coming to cover. And so whether that was a defensive tackle or a defensive end, but no bust on his end on that part.
You said you're pretty hard on him. How do you balance that feedback with, he's kind of stepping into a pretty unique situation? What do you do?
Yeah, I think he reminds me of a guy way early on in my career that I spent a lot of time with, Michael Bennett. And so, for him, he was a defensive end in college, and I came to say, hey, man, we're going to, put you down at defensive tackle. And he's thinking, what in the hell are you talking about? But he played a lot of really good winning football, playing as a nickel 3 technique in Seattle. And but he's somebody that just kept growing and growing and growing based on here was a new skill set that he could do. So with Micah, I'm challenging him to find the things that he does really well and make sure that I don't overload him, but I can find the exact things that I want him to get done. And so he's still developing, and that's kind of the fun part of this, to say here's a guy who, played limited time at Penn State for 2 years out last year, and now he's heading into his third game. We got a lot of work to do to keep developing, but I've got great belief in him, and just I can't wait to see where we're going to take him to. But I've got a high standard for him.
Is that a balancing act of what he does best and letting him do what he does best, or does he does everything so well that
No. There's a lot to develop here. He's not he's got a long way to go to develop.
I know sometimes you be master, jack of all trades, master none. Is there one? Does he master? He has the ability to master everything.
He can run and hit like a, like that's his superpower, and he's got rare speed and physicality to do that. And so I want to make sure that we're always featuring that part of his game.
You talked about how going forward, which position he'll spend a certain amount of time with will depend on the game plan. For a day like today, when obviously his film's more defensive line, but you want to make sure that what the linebackers did, he's super aware for if he goes back to linebacker moving forward. How do you decide where he goes and where did he go?
To the defensive line for the film part, and then with Coach Edwards as another review after that about the linebackers.
And what have you learned about his energy when he's on the field and how he rallies teammates, whether he's communicating the defense with the headset on or coming off the field?
Well, I think people lead in different ways, and so for him, his leadership comes from just relentlessly going. He's not somebody that's going to be the vocal piece to bring everybody around and go, but his energy, his speed that he plays with, the physicality, that's leading in your own way by putting that on the tape. As far as the helmet goes, and I'm glad that you brought that up, it's really not the way I view it as this big thing. It's more like you're starting the information. So if you had the green dot for us, you would start the information. Then I expect about another 8 or 9 guys to start talking. Here's the information. So it's different from a quarterback, where you're making all the stuff and all the checks and all the things. When you get it to the defense, it's passing all the information to 10 other guys, and I expect them to talk. So it's more like you have to start the communication, and then from there, the whole defense should be taking over. So I didn't want to be confused and you guys be unaware of how I view that.
You get creative in your meetings. Do you ever have them play a game of telephone to make sure that when it's going for next?
It's basically pass the message. Yep. And so the best of the best can do that, and it's pre-snap and it's post-snap. But the call, to me, I could, in the old days we just signal, so it's not that different than that, except we don't have to signal. So what happened when we signaled? Everybody started talking. Well, this is the same space of passing the message, and now everybody, the communication then goes to 10 other players.
Your philosophy of communication and its importance, is that something that transcends your time in a football building, like in your personal life? Is communication something that carries
I would
over?
say that. Yep. I haven't been in too many arguments with my wife. Said, man, we are really over communicating right now. So I would say it's super important in any walk of life. Everybody who's laughing right now is certainly thinking in their own space. Yeah, that's definitely not the case. So yeah, it's super important on the communication side, and being comfortable with the uncomfortable conversations too. Like usually it's not as bad as we make it out in our own head. Like, hey man, this is what's going on, this is what we need to do, and this is how we're going to get it done. I think most ball players would like direct communication because quite often they've been bullshitted a lot in their life through recruiting, through college, and in the NFL. And this coach says, yeah, you're doing good, and then behind, why am I not playing? So like direct, clear, concise communication is good. And I don't care what sport you're playing in. If you're going to play good defense, you better be talking.
How long have y'all been married, one guys?
We have been married 25 years. So we've had lots of good communication.
So no fights.
Lots of good communication. All right, you guys have a good one.
Thank you.